The call came on a Tuesday. My father was gone. Just like that. Heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. I barely had time to process before my sister Elaine called, her voice strangely hesitant as she told me she'd be bringing someone to the funeral. A new boyfriend, she said. It's serious. I didn't think much of it then. I was too busy arranging the funeral in our small Connecticut town, choosing the hymns Dad loved, finding his favorite navy suit. I arrived at the funeral home early, the closed casket draped with white lilies, Dad's military photo displayed beside it. I was straightening his medals when I heard Elaine's laugh from the entrance. Turning to greet them, my world stopped. Standing beside my sister, arm wrapped possessively around her waist, was my husband, Michael. The same Michael who had told me he was on a business trip to Chicago. The same Michael I'd been married to for 8 years. And there he was, at my father's funeral, as my sister's new boyfriend. What happened next changed everything. Because what Michael didn't know was that I had already found out about them weeks ago, and I came prepared. Growing up in Woodridge, Connecticut, our family looked picture-perfect from the outside. Dad was a respected Navy veteran who later became the town's most trusted accountant. Mom left when I was 10, walked out one Christmas morning, and never looked back. That left Dad raising Elaine and me alone in our colonial house on Maple Street, where generations of our family had lived. Elaine was always Dad's favorite, something neither of them bothered to hide. 3 years older than me, she was the golden child, homecoming queen, valedictorian, Cornell graduate. I was the practical one, the responsible one. While Elaine chased dreams in New York City, I stayed in Woodridge, started a small bookkeeping business, and took care of Dad when his health began declining. "You're just like your mother," Elaine would say whenever I complained about being overlooked, always thinking you deserve more than you get. It was the cruelest thing she could say, and she knew it. When I was 16, I saved all summer to buy a vintage dress for my junior prom. The night before, Elaine, home from college, borrowed it without asking and spilled red wine all over it. When I broke down crying, Dad just shrugged. She needed something to wear to her date with the Hanover boy. You know how important that family is in this town. I ended up wearing an old sundress to prom while everyone whispered about how I couldn't afford anything better. Then there was my college graduation. Dad promised he'd be there, but at the last minute, Elaine had a gallery opening for her photography in Manhattan. "Your sister might meet important people," Dad explained over the phone while I sat alone at the ceremony. "You understand, don't you, kiddo?" I always understood. I always forgave. I met Michael at a Chamber of Commerce meeting 5 years after college. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in me. Not Elaine, not my connection to Dad, just me. When he proposed after a year, I couldn't believe my luck. Even Dad seemed impressed, slapping Michael on the back at our engagement party, saying, "Never thought Caroline would land someone like you." A compliment wrapped in an insult, Dad's specialty. The wedding was small, just how I wanted it. Elaine showed up late, gave a rambling speech about how surprised she was that I'd found someone, then left early. Dad didn't even notice. He was too busy introducing Michael to his golfing buddies as the son I never had. For a while, things were good. Michael and I bought a small Tudor-style house across town. We were trying for a baby. I thought we were happy. Then, 3 months ago, Dad called me over for Sunday dinner. He seemed unusually solemn as he poured himself a whiskey. "I'm leaving the house to Elaine," he announced without preamble. "I know you expected it to be split between you girls, but Elaine needs it more. Her career is unpredictable." I was stunned. I'd been the one checking in on him daily, managing his medications, driving him to appointments. "What about me, Dad? What about everything I've done for you?" He looked genuinely confused. "You have Michael. You have your little business. Elaine's alone in the world." What Dad didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, I'd found text messages on Michael's phone, hundreds of them, to and from my sister. The earliest from just after our wedding, pictures, plans to meet, declarations of love. And the most recent, "Can't wait to finally be together." Just a little longer.
Dad's funeral was set for Saturday at First Congregational, where our family had attended since before I was born. The morning dawned clear and crisp, that perfect New England fall weather that made the maple trees along Main Street look like they were on fire. I dressed carefully in a black sheath dress, pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, and a single item I'd never worn before, the platinum wedding band Michael had given me, now hanging on a chain around my neck instead of on my finger. I arrived at the church 2 hours early to oversee the arrangements. Reverend Phillips greeted me with a somber nod and a gentle squeeze of my hand. "Your father was a pillar of this community, Caroline. We'll honor him properly." I thanked him and slipped him an envelope. Inside was a USB drive with a PowerPoint of photos I'd prepared, along with a letter I'd asked him to read at a specific moment during the service. The church filled quickly. Dad had been well respected in Woodbridge. The mayor was there, along with half the Rotary Club and dozens of clients from his accounting practice. Mrs. Abernathy, my third-grade teacher, hugged me tightly and whispered, "Your father always spoke so highly of you." I almost laughed. She must have confused me with Elaine. I was arranging the last of the flowers when I heard the whispers start. Turning toward the entrance, I saw them. Elaine in a dramatic black designer dress that was more appropriate for a cocktail party than a funeral, and Michael beside her in the charcoal suit I'd bought him for his last birthday. They weren't touching, but they stood close enough that everyone could see they were together. Several people looked between Michael and me, confusion evident on their faces. Michael's eyes met mine across the church. For a split second, pure panic flashed across his face before he composed himself. He whispered something to Elaine, who glanced at me with what looked almost like pity before they made their way to the front pew, my father's family pew, as if they had every right to be there together. I felt Aunt Martha's hand on my arm. "Caroline, what on earth is going on? Isn't that—" "Yes," I said quietly, "that's my husband, with my sister." Her face flushed with anger. "Does your father know? Did he know about this?" "No," I replied, "but everyone else will soon enough." As the service began, I took my seat in the front pew, deliberately leaving space between myself and Elaine. Michael wouldn't look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on the casket. Elaine, however, kept glancing at me nervously. She tried once to speak to me, leaning over to whisper, "We need to talk after this. There's so much you don't understand." I smiled at her. It wasn't a nice smile. "Oh, I understand perfectly." Reverend Phillips spoke eloquently about Dad's service to the community, his dedication as a father, I bit my tongue at that part, and his legacy. Then came the eulogy. As the eldest, tradition dictated Elaine should deliver it. She rose and walked to the pulpit, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. "My father wasn't a perfect man," she began, "but he loved his family in his own way." Her voice broke slightly. "He always pushed us to reach for more, to never settle." Her eyes flickered to Michael, then back to her notes. "He taught us to be strong, to fight for what we want in life, even when—" she paused, swallowing hard, "even when others might not understand our choices." Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was becoming clear to everyone that something was very wrong. I sat perfectly still, my hand wrapped around the wedding ring hanging from my neck. As Elaine finished and returned to her seat, Reverend Phillips announced it was time for the photo memorial. "Caroline has prepared a tribute to her father," he explained, dimming the lights. The first slides played, Dad in his Navy uniform, Dad holding baby Elaine, Dad at his accounting office opening. Familiar, safe images. Then, as planned, Reverend Phillips paused the slideshow. "Before we continue, Caroline has asked me to read a letter she's written." He unfolded the paper I'd given him. Michael stiffened beside Elaine, clearly sensing something was amiss. "Today," Reverend Phillips read in his deep, carrying voice, "as we gather to honor my father, I find myself confronting not just grief, but betrayal that cuts to the very heart of what family means." Elaine grabbed Michael's arm. I saw her whisper frantically, "What is she doing?" I stood up slowly, turning to face the congregation instead of the reverend.
Actually, I said clearly, I think I'd prefer to read it myself. I walked to the pulpit with measured steps, the sound of my heels echoing through the now silent church. Reverend Phillips looked uncertain but handed me the letter. I didn't need it. I'd memorized every word. "Thank you all for coming today to honor my father," I began, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "As many of you know, Dad wasn't one for public scenes or drama. He valued appearances above almost everything." I paused, looking directly at Elaine and Michael. Almost everything. I removed the chain from around my neck, holding up my wedding ring so it caught the light streaming through the stained glass windows. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my husband of 8 years and my sister have been having an affair since shortly after our wedding day. A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Michael's face drained of color. Elaine stood up. "Caroline, stop this. This isn't the time or place." "When would be a good time, Elaine? After the reading of Dad's will, perhaps? After you've moved into our family home with my husband?" I turned back to the congregation. What you don't know, what my father never knew, is that while I was caring for him during his illness, my sister and my husband were planning their future together, a future that apparently couldn't wait even one day after my father's death before they flaunted it publicly. Michael finally found his voice. "Caroline, you're upset. You're grieving. Let's talk about this privately." I laughed, the sound brittle in the hushed church. "Privacy? That's rich coming from you, Michael. Was it private when you were sleeping with my sister in our bed while I was at hospice with Dad? Was it private when you emptied our joint savings account last week?" I turned to the congregation again. $300,000. My business savings, my inheritance from my grandmother, gone. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. "This is why I'd like to read a different letter today. This one comes from my lawyer." Michael lunged forward, but 2 of Dad's old Navy buddies blocked his path. "To Mr. Michael James Wilson," I read clearly. "This letter serves as formal notice that my client, Caroline Elizabeth Wilson, has filed for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial fraud. Evidence has been submitted to the district attorney's office regarding the unauthorized transfer of funds from joint accounts. Additionally, an injunction has been filed preventing the sale or transfer of any assets belonging to the estate of Jonathan William Foster pending investigation into communications suggesting conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud." I looked up from the letter. "That means the house, Elaine. The house Dad left entirely to you in his new will. The one you convinced him to change 3 months ago, right around the time you and Michael decided it was time to go public with your relationship." Elaine's face contorted with rage and panic. "You can't prove anything. Dad wanted me to have the house. He told you himself." "Yes, he did. But what he didn't know was that you and Michael had already listed it with a realtor. I have the paperwork, Elaine, signed by you, dated 2 weeks ago. Were you planning to sell our family home before Dad was even in the ground?" The murmurs in the church grew louder. I could see the mayor whispering to his wife, Mrs. Abernathy covering her mouth in shock, Dad's golfing buddies glaring at Michael with undisguised contempt. "I have copies of everything," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "The text messages, the hotel receipts, the offshore account you opened together, and most damning of all, the emails where you discussed how to convince Dad to change his will." I looked directly at Elaine. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I'm an accountant, just like Dad. Following the money is what I do." Michael made another move toward me, his face a mask of fury. "You vindictive bitch!" "That's enough," Reverend Phillips thundered, surprising everyone. "This is still God's house, and we are here to lay a man to rest." I nodded, suddenly feeling very calm. "You're right, Reverend, and I'm finished." I turned to look at my father's casket one last time. Dad always said Elaine was the smart one. I guess we'll never know what he would have thought about all this. I placed my wedding ring on the pulpit. I won't be needing this anymore. As I walked down the aisle toward the exit, the congregation parted like the Red Sea. Some reached out to touch my arm in support. Others couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't look back, not even when I heard Elaine's voice rising hysterically behind me, not even when something crashed to the floor. Outside, the autumn air felt like freedom. I took my first deep breath in months and walked away from the church, away from my father, away from the life that had been slowly suffocating me for years. The aftermath was exactly the chaos you'd expect. I drove straight from the church to the Harborview Inn, a small bed and breakfast on the outskirts of town, where I'd booked a room for the week. I turned off my phone, ordered room service, and slept for 14 hours straight. The first real sleep I'd had since finding those texts on Michael's phone. When I finally turned my phone back on the next day, I had 73 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Most were from Elaine and Michael, alternating between rage and desperate attempts at justification. "It just happened," Elaine wrote. "We never meant to hurt you." Michael's messages were more practical. "The DA won't press charges. You're overreacting. Let's talk about a fair settlement." But there were other messages too. From Aunt Martha, "Your grandmother would have been proud of you today." From my cousin Rachel, "I always knew there was something off about those two. Stay with us if you need a place." Even from Mrs. Abernathy, "Your father's funeral will be remembered in this town for generations, but not for the reasons anyone expected." The most surprising call came from Mayor Whitfield himself, asking if I would meet him for coffee. Curious, I agreed. 2 days after the funeral, we sat at a corner table in Woodbridge Coffee Roasters, away from prying eyes. "What happened at the church was unprecedented," he began, stirring his coffee nervously. "But it's what I learned afterward that concerns me." He lowered his voice. "Your father's accounting firm handled the town's finances for decades. After what you revealed about your sister and husband's financial activities, the town council is concerned." I understood immediately. "You're worried they had access to the town accounts?" He nodded grimly. "We need someone we can trust to conduct a thorough audit. Someone who knows your father's systems but isn't implicated in any potential impropriety." By the end of the week, I had been hired as a special consultant to the town of Woodbridge. The audit took 3 months and uncovered something I never expected. Dad had been running 2 sets of books for years. Nothing illegal, just creative. He'd been quietly moving money from wealthy clients to support local businesses struggling after the mill closed. Robin Hood accounting, hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, the divorce proceeded quickly. Michael, facing potential criminal charges for the emptied accounts, agreed to my terms without a fight. The prenup, he'd never bothered to read carefully, turned out to be quite thorough. My lawyer had made sure of that. He walked away with his clothes and his car, nothing more. Elaine was a different story. She fought the injunction on Dad's estate viciously, hiring an expensive Hartford lawyer who specialized in contested wills. But her case fell apart when the realtor she'd contacted about selling the house came forward with emails proving she'd been planning the sale weeks before Dad's death. The final blow came when Dad's old secretary, Mrs. Peterson, testified that she'd seen Elaine pressure our father to sign the new will while he was heavily medicated after a minor stroke, a detail none of us had known. In the end, the court invalidated the new will. The house and Dad's remaining assets were split between Elaine and me, as specified in his original will from years earlier. I bought out Elaine's half of the house, using money from my new consulting business, which was thriving thanks to my work with the town and several private clients who'd witnessed my stand at the funeral. Elaine left Woodbridge, supposedly for California, though I heard rumors she'd actually gone to Florida with a new boyfriend. Michael disappeared from my life completely. The last I heard, he was working at a car dealership in New Hampshire, telling customers he was a widower. 6 months after the funeral, I was sorting through Dad's home office when I found a hidden compartment in his desk. Inside was a small leather journal and a sealed envelope with my name on it. The journal contained entries dating back to when Mom left, revealing a side of my father I'd never known, his doubts, his fears, his regrets. The last entry was dated just 3 days before his death. "Caroline came by today," he'd written in his shaky hand. "She thinks I don't notice how she makes sure my pills are organized, how she stocks the refrigerator when she thinks I'm napping." Elaine called wanting money again. I said no this time. Caroline deserves better than I've given her. Too late to change the past, but perhaps not too late for the future. The envelope contained a safe deposit box key and a note. "For Caroline, who was always stronger than I gave her credit for. I'm sorry." The safe deposit box held stock certificates, shares in 3 blue-chip companies Dad had purchased in my name over the years, quietly building a portfolio worth nearly twice what the house was worth. Along with the certificates was another note. "I could never say it properly, but I was always proud of you." A year after the funeral, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner in the family home. Aunt Martha was there, along with Rachel and her kids, Mrs. Peterson, and my new friend James, the town librarian who'd asked me out for coffee 6 months earlier and hadn't left my side since. As we sat around the table Dad had built by hand 30 years earlier, Martha raised her glass. "To Caroline," she said, "who showed us all what real strength looks like." James squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time, the sense of being exactly where I belonged, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me. That night, after everyone had gone and James was helping me with the dishes, he asked what I planned to do with the house long term. "I'm thinking of turning the front part into a community financial literacy center," I said. "Free tax prep for seniors, budgeting classes for young people, that sort of thing." "And the family part? Will you stay?" I looked around at the walls that had witnessed so much pain and, finally, some healing. "Yes," I said. "This is home now, on my terms." It's been 2 years since that day at the church when I chose to reclaim my life. I won't pretend it was easy. Grief rarely travels a straight line, and betrayal leaves scars that fade but never disappear completely. But there's a strength that comes from surviving what you once thought would destroy you. The Financial Literacy Center is thriving now, helping dozens of families in our community. James and I were married last spring in a small ceremony by the lake. No drama, just love and honesty. And sometimes, when I'm working late in Dad's old office, I swear I can feel him watching, finally seeing me for who I am. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's built by choice, by finding people who truly see you and choosing to stand in your truth, even when it would be easier to stay silent. My story isn't over, it's just beginning, on my own terms. And if you're facing your own version of betrayal or invisibility, know that you have more power than you realize. Your voice matters. Your boundaries matter. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own diminishment. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and transformation. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. And remember, the ending of one chapter is just the beginning of another. Thank you for listening to my journey.